You crest a low hill in the forest, finding it lit by scattered hellfire. In the center, a demon of the old world unfurls its wings, welcoming you to your last breath.
Have you ever been to a convention for any reason? My first gaming convention was in 1987. It was Origins in Baltimore, and I went to play a game called Starfleet Battles. SFB is not a role-playing game, of course, but it is what got me to conventions in the first place. I did not play any role-playing games until Origins of 1992. After that convention, it'd be another decade before I made my way back to gaming conventions of any kind. In October this year, we had Multiverse 2023. It's the Multiverse shirt from a previous year. The fifth incarnation of that convention held here in Atlanta. Atlanta has a strong geek convention scene, and Multiverse is making a strong showing, quickly growing in both numbers and in reputation. You can thank the con chairs for that. They do a great job. We are proud of the work we do at Multiverse. Since the beginning, I've overseen the play track. It's a panel track where we talk about all aspects of gaming across the spectrum. Board games, obviously role-playing games, and video games as well. We also have a game room, of course, where people play board games and RPGs and card games. But this year is our best year, by far. Going to Now showed up in full force, and Zero Means You're Dead managed to grab an interview with my friend, author and indie adventure writer Judy Black. Judy not only consented to an interview, but was once again a mainstay of the play track, as she has been over several years. The highlight of the convention, other than our interview, was the Indie RPG Design Jam panel. I was not present at that panel, but the audience came up with a fantastic game that they turned into a real flesh and blood role-playing game. Look for it coming up this year in one of our Hit the Dice sessions. Our friend and guest Egg Embry showed up as well, and Egg participated in a few panels. Finally, we ran for the second year Chuck Tingle again for the audience, and next year I have an idea or three to turn that into something people can watch, maybe in real time. Hit the Dice at Multiverse, call it. The game itself went well, and the players were fantastic as always, but the system is not great for convention games, especially the kind of improv format, which will lead into my villain monologue in a bit. However, some notes first. The next Zero episode will come in February, and we're working towards a regular-ish schedule for that. As this is a show about RPGs, an irregular schedule fits into the theme. But we at Go Indie Now know you love content on the regular, so look for our RPG content to become a more regular thing. Speaking of, Hit the Dice episode number 3 will premiere in February on the first Monday. I will be taking the GM seat for the first time and running the RPG I've been running on about. That's right, it's time for some Shadow Dark RPG goodness. At the end of the show, we're going to replay my top 5 indie RPG games of 2023, which is from our This Year in Indies end of year show. It's a fantastic show. I recommend checking it out. Also, go ahead and check out Hit the Dice number 2, where our friend Bob Agu ran one of his games that he designed, and the 3 players had a fantastic time. So check out Hit the Dice number 2 and Hit the Dice number 1, where Egg Embry ran his game, Human Almost. Now, let's get villainous. What makes for a good convention game? To be honest, I do not know if I have a great answer. I certainly have run a few fun ones in my time, and I've run a few duds, for sure. A great deal depends on the purpose of the game, to be honest, and the session. Many folks use conventions to introduce their home games to people, and yes, they will bring their home game to a convention and run it. It's often a variant of published games, or they'll get folks introduced to a favorite small press or indie game. which is always fantastic. I know the big boxes dominate conventions and use the venues to push product more than anything. It's not that they don't have a good time doing what they're doing, it's just that the primary goal is to sell product. Indie games, the primary goal is really kind of marketing as well. And small presses do the same thing, when you can, often on the cheap, using their limited resources. But still, let's assume your primary goal is to run an effective, engaging convention game. You don't have any other goal other than that. You're not trying to sell anything, which is most of the convention games you run into. And they could be either in person or online. For our purposes, we don't need to discriminate between the two. Some games do better in one environment or the other, but indie games, which is where we focus, tend towards being viable in either space. So rule number one for running a good convention game is make sure the game you choose is appropriate for the kind of convention you're at. Honestly, you want to make sure content-wise the game is appropriate. If it's a game convention for children, maybe not run your Swedish death metal game. That's not necessarily appropriate. Kids like death metal, but maybe their parents might not. For a more adult-oriented or over-age convention, they might not necessarily be into all your newfangled games. So, picking a game that's a bit more traditional might excite people, even if it's a new game, but has more traditional system or design. So yes, make sure the game you choose is appropriate to the kind of convention you're at. Our next rule may seem logical, but you as a game master may not be the expert on the game you choose. You may find that people who come to play because they love that game and they know the rules very well. That's okay. No problem. It's great when they know the rules as well, or even better than you do. You can ask them questions. They love to be engaged like that. Engage your players. But I always suggest running a game that in system that you have some familiarity with. Make sure that you've read through it. If you're running an adventure for that game that you've written, or especially if someone else has written that adventure, you should read through it several times if possible. Yes, there are many stories online and you can read them, and I've done it too, where you came to the table sight unseen, you've never read the adventure, and you somehow got to make this work for 6 people sitting at you hoping to be entertained for 2 to 4 hours. It can be a nightmare. So make sure you know the game, make sure you know the material. You don't have to be the expert, I'm not saying that. I am saying that you should know the game pretty well. Take it from me, who has run a game that he had never run before at a convention, and sometimes it works, most times it doesn't. So rule number 3, use pre-generated characters, or pre-gens as we call them. Pre-gens allow you to become more familiar with the game because you're creating the characters beforehand. Or if you're using pre-created, pre-generated characters, give them a good read through. It'll give you an idea of what the designer thinks is important for the game. If you're very familiar with the game, I would go as far as to simplify the character sheet and the character as much as possible. Focus on what's important about the game. That will give new players, and even experienced players, an idea of what kind of adventure or game that you're going to be running, right? And I mean content-wise, not necessarily system-wise. But most systems can be cut down a little bit to allow ease of play in a convention setting. If you're designing your adventure or mission or whatever it is, your situation, as we call it, designing the situation, keep it simple as well, and marry those two together. The idea of simplified characters that are ready to roll, that make sense for the situation. For warriors in a school for magic, probably not necessarily the best combination, right? So create characters or find pre-generated characters for the players that make sense for the situation that you've created, right? Always a good idea. And it really makes the game go faster. Now, there are some games where part of the joy, and definitely part of play, is making your character for that game session. absolutely don't pre-gen. If that's like a special part of the game, make sure your players get that full participation in that regard. Lastly, rule 4: choose your game carefully. I know that all the rules so far talked about this, but I ran Chuck Tingle as an improv session where the rules were play, but the space is made to improvise. It might be more accurate to say we did not play Chuck Tingle's RPG as much as we performed the Chuck Tingle RPG, and that's just what it was for. Most convention games are designed to give an authentic experience to the system, authentic play, not entertain. Remember that. Yes, role-playing games are an entertaining medium, right? We enjoy them, or we hope so. We hope we enjoy them while we're playing them. But we're not necessarily there to entertain people at the table in a theatrical way, nor are we there to entertain people who are watching. In fact, most of the times I hate it when people watch our convention games because audience members are rarely good audience members. What you want to do, what your goal should be, is to give that authentic experience of the game. So choose a game carefully that you think will do that. And I realize that we've created a bunch of Venn diagrams here where we've narrowed it down to a small subset of games or a game that you may be comfortable running at a convention. And that's okay, right? You're running content, again, 2 to 4 hours, maybe several times over the weekend. Make it good for you, make it easy for the players to get into. Many times you're going to be getting people of all ages and experience levels. Keep that in mind when you're designing your situation and when you're choosing your game. I'd also choose a system that's not too obtuse or weighed down with extraneous functions. Am I saying don't play crunchy games at conventions? No, I'm not saying that. But games that have a lot of toggles don't necessarily make for the convention fun or experiences, because you're always filling with the rules, you're always have to explain a rule, it slows the game down, and you do have limited time. It's not like you will be able to, or in most cases, it's not like you're going to be able to pick this up the next day. If you don't know what crunch means, we have a definition for it right here for you. But as always, the choice is yours. If you feel comfortable running a game with a lot of crunch, go right ahead. It's your game after all. And I've seen people run very complicated systems in a very enthusiastic way, and the people had a blast at their table, laughing, strangers high-fiving one another. Just to put a bow on convention and convention gaming, that is one of the joys of running a convention game, is meeting new people, new players. In the old days, I won't say before the internet, because the internet was around, but before it was common for us to communicate over the internet, you could look forward to seeing the same people at conventions over and over again, year to year. So it was a kind of coming together of friends and acquaintances. That still happens quite a bit at in-person conventions. Certainly Multiverse for a big family, not just the people who put the convention on, but the membership. It's a great convention. If you've never been to Multiverse, look us up, coming this October. And that's it. Highly recommend when you go to conventions to run a game. If you have a favorite game, doesn't matter what it is. I'd love for you to run an indie game, but if you want to run one of the big box games, that's cool too. It's a great way to meet people, to get comfortable in spaces where a lot of us are not always comfortable. Okay, that's my monologue for this month, or for this session. I hope you got something out of it, and it's always time to go indie now. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Multiverse. Zero means you're dead, and today we have the incomparable Judy Black with us. Hello, how you doing?
Good. I'm awake.
It is Sunday at Multiverse, folks, so it's been a weekend for all of us here. What's been your favorite gaming thing this weekend?
Oh, that's so tough, because the design game jam was super fun, and we came up with a killer concept.
And then you have the table of profession, department,
Yeah.
and
Or like rank, like
and what you were written up for last.
Oh God.
That's forward.
Microwaving fish.
how does that come in handy
I mean,
later?
those
You
would
can
be,
like
like,
smoke
three-
out the conference room.
Yeah, so those could be 3 stats that every character has of their profession, their last write-up, and then their rank.
Yeah. I like that. Because then it's because you got IT, you got HR, you got finance. Yeah.
The people who do the actual work.
Sales.
Editorial.
Editorial,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Warehouse. I'm imagining like Dunder Mifflin now.
I'm right there with it.
Yeah.
But like if you're a customer service, you get like a +1 to your charisma.
Yes.
And like if you're IT, you get +1 to your intelligence.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not intelligence, but so much. We have different skills based off of what kind of advantages you have over your enemies, like sabotage, or rhetoric, or
Negotiation.
Yeah, administrators get like the per my last email ability.
well, they also
Stop. Someone recently was doing the per my last emails are basically spell casting in real life.
Success. So, and it's for using D12, we can do that. You know, we can
easily.
just
I
port,
like that.
we will rip that, we can just rip that off and save us a lot of design time.
Yeah.
So,
Really straightforward. I really.
and the whole,
Less math.
the whole success with a complication just makes for a lot of fun. Like it gives the DM, ooh, let's
Let's complicate things.
let's add a little zazz.
Especially if you have the players chime, like you're allowed to say, okay, so we have complication, you, and just point to one of the other players. What is that complication? And that way you have everyone engaged in creating a story, and it's not just on that one person leading the game.
Yeah, that's one of the big elements of Powered by Apocalypse games. It's supposed to be a lot more communally. You're telling a story together rather than the GM is telling the story. So.
But I mean, how do you top Tingleverse and playing in the Tingleverse and getting to be the unicorn conquering the queen of mashed potatoes? So I might have to say it's a tie between those two because I don't truly think I could pick a favorite.
Gotcha. Awesome. Tell us how you got into gaming. What was your on-roading?
So I am an enormous video game nerd. That's how I started out. Is I was a huge video game nerd when I was growing up, and I actually started taking French in middle school and high school because I was going to go to a game design school in Quebec. And then when I applied, they essentially said women need not apply. And so I was like, oh, okay, and went on with my life doing other things. And after I graduated college, I got into Dungeons and Dragons, where weirdly I have only ever played with other women. I think we've had like one token dude in our groups. So that's been, people talk about their D&D experiences, and I'm like, oh my God, men play it? What?
That's actually the second time this weekend I've heard that. Miss Massey was saying the same thing.
Yeah.
That she primarily played with female players.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say what's that like because I have played with female players before. Folks, a little bit what that kind of game, because I think people think about a role-playing game, especially the fantasy genre, where it's just a lot of there's a lot of testosterone and bashing down doors and using words like wench and things like that. So tell us a little bit about the other side of that.
Okay, so I started with 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons, and then ended up in 3.5, and then ended up in 5e. So it's been like a weird round journey. But my DM lovingly says that I'm a nightmare to DM for. My very, very, very first session ever, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't buy any supplies. We get into the cave, it's pitch black. So my character is like, well, my clothing isn't doing me any good. It doesn't add any armor. So I'm going to take off all my clothing and tie it to a stick and just run naked through what turned out to be an acid cave.
Fantastic.
So that went really well. And then we had a forced moral puzzle where you could push the rock and crush a clutch of eggs, or you could push the rock and block the treasure. And I asked the infamous question of, well, how much does the rock weigh? and use Tensor's floating disk to just lift the rock up and belly crawl to both of them. After that, my DM was like, okay, I'm gonna need to think a little bit more before I run a game with you.
Always the challenging player.
Yeah, I tend to come up with option Q and just sort of do my own thing and cause problems and solutions that aren't expected, I guess. So it's, in my experience, most of the games have been more about the interactions between the players, the NPCs, kind of building the lore of the world, the story, and less focused on necessarily the numbers. Like the rules and everything are still there, but that's less of the focus. Usually, our sessions, we tend to go many sessions without an actual fight, which works for some players and works for doesn't. And different groups like different things in their games. And I have been lucky to find a group that is happy to sort of have a slightly less balanced game, I suppose. We have fewer fights and more social encounters.
But those social encounters are still meaningful, right?
Yeah. Well, in the group that I have been running an Everon campaign for the past 3 years. We started near the start of the pandemic, and we're still going. And it's all spellcasters. Like, there's not a positive strength score amongst them, bless their hearts. So it adds some interesting challenges for me running it to figure out what is a challenge I can present that's not picking the lock, because there's one positive dex score amongst them and nobody knows how to use these tools, and nobody picked knock as a spell, of course.
Of course not.
So it's an interesting challenge, but I like that about every D&D game, and every tabletop group is super different.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of meet them where they are, which is one of the things that makes this fun, is it's not the same thing every time you play.
Right. So you're a published author. How did you go from being involved in D&D to, fiction author, but also you've written quite a few supplements as well.
Yeah, so it's sort of a weird story. In graduate school, I wrote my master's thesis is about the nature of self in virtual spaces, particularly virtual reality and video games. So I spend a lot of time online sort of looking at conversations, and I just happened to see a tweet one day from Ashley Warren, who was putting together an anthology about female monsters in D&D. And I was like, that's not something I've ever thought about that you could do. So I applied, and I got accepted for a Headless Horsewoman adventure, which was a lot of fun, and it was a great process. The whole group worked really closely together, helping one another make sure that things got finished, got edited, went through the whole lovely, long process of getting something from idea to completion, which is the biggest challenge, I think, of any kind of creative thing, is to go from start to absolute finish, because there are a lot of steps involved. But that was the first one that I did, and after that I was sort of just hooked and kept on with it.
So you've got a number of things on the DM's Guild, right?
Yes, and I've started to put a couple things out on Drive-Thru RPG now too.
Okay. So 2 quick questions. Number one, I know you just released something new. Go ahead and let people know about that.
Yeah, so I have 2 pretty new projects. The first one is John Hartness's book series called Bubba the Monster Hunter. And we are working together to turn those into sort of urban fantasy Dungeons & Dragons adventures. So the first one is out, where you can fight the jockstrap priest and stop the zombies taking over Chattanooga, Tennessee. And it's very short, very fun, very just maybe a 1 or 2 hour adventure. It's short and easy. And the other one is something I've been working on for a while, which is called the Wheel, Woe, and What of Fortune Telling, which is a collection of 5 different fortune tellers using different methods, and each of them I've included 20 random predictions as well as an implication that can have in a game. And I made that system agnostic just because I think fortune telling is a really fun mechanic in any kind of tabletop game, but it's a little intimidating, I guess, for a lot of DMs, because you're like, oh, they say this vaguely threatening woo thing. What does that mean? So I thought it would be fun to like have something that spells it out a little more clearly for the DM. So it says, oh, you know, the path ahead is trodden and heavy, and you're like, oh, okay, so the next 2 days are going to have difficult terrain. Okay, cool. It'll be slower travel for the next few days. That's what that means. Great. I don't have to think, because DMs have so much that they're doing. So much that they are doing. So anything that I can do to help with that process is pretty good.
So the last thing I want to ask about the kerfuffle with the OGL earlier this year, as an independent writer, how did that, if that affected you, how did you feel about that?
So I had the blessed, I'll say fortune, of having been retweeted by the DMs Guild right before that all happened. So I got lots of nasty people in my Twitter mentions yelling at me about supporting WotC and doing all of this, and I was like, I'm just a little guy. I have nothing to do with this. The whole thing has been super disappointing. I'm glad that they backtracked, but the whole thing has sort of left a trust issue, shall we say.
I agree with that.
And it's one of the reasons why I've started to do more things on Drive-Thru RPG that are less directly tied with Dungeons and Dragons, because I kind of want to unhitch my horse from entirely just being based on them. Because I've played a lot of other systems and love a lot of other systems. So I'm like, okay, yeah, there's no reason for me to not do something with those too. But yeah, it's not been a fun year with WotC. They just keep kind of shoving their foot in their mouth and being like, toenail, I like it.
Yes.
Like, just like, no, please stop.
So let everybody know where they can find you on social media and where they can find your books and your other books.
So I am Judy Black on pretty much every social media site. And my website is judyblackcloud.com. Very original, I know. And my work is available on Drive-Thru RPG and DM's Guild. If you just look for Judy Black, you'll find my stuff. And yeah, it's super. This has been like such a fun weekend.
Yeah, and Judy always always comes to the game, has been in the Chuck Tingle game twice. And
they're so fun.
And it's always a great addition to the play track, so I really appreciate you being here for that. Thank
Always
you so
happy
much.
to be here.
And thank you for being on Zero Means Your Dad.
Father, what is this?
It's Indies, son. God damn Indies.
What's an indie?
Only the most unruliest, God-forsaken bunch of miscreants and misanthropes there has ever been.
Who brought them here?
I don't know, son. But if we let them in, they will surely be taking over.
Well, Father, you know what we should do?
Yes, son. We have no choice. We cannot let them take over our formulaic, automatonic way of life.
But Father, it feels so freeing.
Liberating. No, not you. No, son, not you. Come on, Father. Don't you know? Oh, no. It's always time to go, Indy, now.
All right, Sean, you want to unveil your number 5 indie game of 2023 for us?
Yeah, the number 5 indie game is an OSR game called Knave, or Knave 2, I should say. It's a second edition of the original Knave, which came out a few years ago. It highlights a lot of what people who prefer OSR games which, rulings, not rules, pretty rules light, to be honest. Ben makes a fun game, and Knave is sort of I believe it was his first, so absolutely check it out. It is much more of a game about it's not your typical dungeon crawly game. It's a little bit more than that, but it does require the player to toggle a few more switches than normal, even though it's rules light, and it's pretty well thought of. You can
So all the games today you can pick up on Drive-Thru RPG. I don't get any money from Drive-Thru. I believe you can also order them from the author sites. But yeah, you should easily grab all of them and pick up Knave, the original, or Knave 2, either one. You won't be sorry.
As SM Hillman, Sean's fourth pick for Indie Game of the Year.
So Across the Thousand Dead Worlds. So this is the only what I would consider to be sci-fi version or game on here, with a caveat for the next one in line. But the reason I picked it was the scope. It's a lot of sci-fi games cross into horror as well. And so if you like even either genre, you will enjoy playing this game. Its system is fairly easy to pick up. I love the artwork, especially. And I think that the reason I picked it was because of the games that I've actually looked into, prepped, toyed with a little bit. It's the one that is the science fiction one that stood out to me the most and intrigued me the most. So it's on the slate for next being played next year at some point. Maybe at Multiverse. Shout out to Multiverse. It just beat out another game called Dead in Space, so I'd also recommend that for you folks. Yeah, and the horror elements will be fantastic. You'll enjoy it.
Yeah, it looks beautiful. Big book though. There's a lot of rules.
Well, and a lot of the smaller publishers, see, it's difficult, really. They're using Kickstarter and everything to be able to put that kind of artwork into the games, and that's very cool, right? I think that's a great use of your Kickstarter money, is to make great art, because players love games with great art. So I just want to mention for Knave 2, that was created by Ben Milton. And Across the Thousand Dead Worlds is Alex T. I want to give shout outs to the authors. So number 3 is my other sci-fi-ish game. It's much more cyberpunk. It's called Cities Without Number. It's by Sin Nomine Press. And Kevin Crawford is the author. Kevin has put out a couple games in this vein. Worlds Without Number is a fantasy game, and Stars Without Number is which is original, which is science fiction. And they all use basically the same system. It's very close to Dungeons and Dragons, but it's what I would say it's a little bit more skill based than D&D. Definitely OSR adjacent if you like those games. So the system itself is pretty basic, but what I like about all Kevin's games is that the scope of not necessarily the setting, but the scope of the stories that you can tell in this RPG is large. All sorts of cyberpunk and near future types of stories. That is a subgenre or idiom of role playing that doesn't always. I mean, there's a lot of near future stuff. It doesn't always get its due, and it doesn't always get. And not all the games are that fantastic. If I'm being honest and critical at the same time. But Cities Without Number, I really liked it. It's easy to get into, which is why it's above a couple of games below it. And if you're someone who's coming from a D&D perspective, it'll be you'll slot right in, no problem.
Right. Bob says that he says that the Without Number series is near the top of his buy list and loves Stars Without Numbers. Tiffany says she loves Stars Without Number. And then Bob says, I will keep waiting to see a cop come and tap on Sean's window. No, but he might have a special guest for us later on. And,
Yeah, maybe.
I think he's parked too, Bob. So I think he's okay.
Yes, I'm parked.
But yeah, that's awesome. Sean, real quickly, with these games that you've unveiled so far, are these all dice-based games?
Yes, these are all dice-based games. Yep.
Okay. All right, Sean, your number 2 indie game of 2023, please.
All right, so I cheated a little bit with this one because this is the new edition of another. Well, I mean, this is not really like a second edition like Nebula's. This is really the ultimate. It's called the Ultimate Chaos Edition. It's Black Sword Hack, the Ultimate Chaos Edition, which the original Black Sword Hack again is an OSR game, firmly in the OSR movement, and it was done with what a lot of indie game designers do, the best that you can do, right? I still enjoy the artwork and everything, the layout, everything from the original. And I did a review of the original for EN World. So the thing you get with this edition of Black Sword Hack is you get the better you get better art, you get a more refined version of it. The thing I love about this game from the original and from this is that a lot of games can be very obtuse when you're trying to get into character creation, but even more so have very little in what we call pedagogy and very little situational prep for the game master. What I think Kobayashi has done here, the author, is put in a very solid way for new and experienced game masters to create a world basically by rolling some dice and doing some basic things that you can play on very quickly and really simply. So for those who don't know me that well, some of you will not be surprised by this. But the reason why Black Sword Hack was on my radar originally is because it's taking it's the author's take on Moorcock's world. So Black Sword Hack refers to Stormbringer, obviously, and everybody gets a demon weapon in this game, which how cool is that? And there are rules for making your demon weapon. And so if you're interested in playing in Moorcock's world, not using I don't think there is currently an RPG for the Eternal Champion. But if you're interested in playing in that world, Black Sword Hack is the way to do it, and the Ultimate Chaos Edition is the ultimate way to do it. So that's why it's my number 2.
Of all your games, this struck me as the most indie. It's like it looks like hey, let's go in our basement and just make some shit up and put it on a piece of paper. That's what this game looks like.
That's exactly
no
what
way
happened.
that this guy's name is Kobayashi. There's no fucking way. Is that his real name, Kobayashi, or is that his alias?
That's his alias. That's what he goes by.
Okay.
But I love it. It's like Kobayashi. Yeah, no, go with it. Yeah.
Well, for film fans, Kobayashi has a special meaning. So if you're a fan of The Usual Suspects, you know what I'm talking about. So.
Okay.
Sean, your number 1 indie game of 2023 is, no surprise if you've been watching Zero Means You're Dead. I knew this before you even said it, because I mean this you invoke this in like 5 times in every interview I've ever seen you interview somebody about. So tell everybody what your number 1 indie game of 2023 is.
So number 1 it brings up some interesting things, but the number 1 indie game this year is Shadow Dark RPG by Kelsey Dion from her Arcane Library. So let me speak a little bit about that as well. Kelsey has worked hard over the years to create a very solid background in adventure and game design. Some of it on the DM's Guild and in other other venues. But and this was a Kickstarter, and it made 1.3 million. And so some people push back a little bit on that being an indie, but I mean, it's absolutely an indie game. Doesn't matter how much money. I mean, let's all hope that we make millions off of our indie creations, right? The thing, okay, so Shadow Dark RPG itself, why is this so good? The designer Kelsey has been able to take old school ideas, OSRs, the kind of stuff, but however you define those, and at the same time has melded it with more modern design. There's a lot of D&D 5e in that, and does so, in my opinion, seamlessly and beautifully. It's a well-designed game, obviously well-edited, obviously play-tested. This is not a lark. This is not someone who just kind of threw some things together and got lucky on Kickstarter. No. Kelsey built up an audience, and a lot of people are talking about this game. I've been prepping some play with this, and it's another one that we're going to see on Hit the Dice this year. But Shadow Dark RPG, you cannot go wrong if you like fantasy that leans a little more towards sword and sorcery, which I do. Then you'll really enjoy it. It's much more deadly than your typical modern fantasy big box games. So I'll warn you up front: your characters will and can die of things like melancholy and diseases and traps, and there's a lot of ways you get killed. It's not exactly Darkest Dungeon the RPG, but it's pretty close. Darkest Dungeon the RPG. Yeah. So Shadow Dark RPG, love it, play it, support the author. Hopefully they'll do more stuff. Yeah.
It spawned a supplement as well, right? So there's somebody who spun off of it and created a supplement for it as well.
Yes. Yep. There are actually several supplements being created for it. So nice. It's an open, not exactly open source. It uses it might use the ORC license, the open role playing something, or the OGL. But I think it uses the ORC license. But you can create your own indie creations out of the source. So highly recommend doing that as well.
Bob says he has a new goal in RPG is to die of melancholy.
Yes, this can be arranged.
And let me just say, as the godfather of indies, anybody who shits on anybody for making $1 million and says that, you can go suck a dick. Go away.
Exactly.
Don't be a part of our community because that's bullshit. We need to celebrate as much. This is an incredible celebration because Kelsey's one of those people that rises boats. So her tide rises a lot of boats, and I don't know her. I've never met her. I've never talked to her, but just in doing like research to kind of put together the graphics for Zero Means You're Dead. I read a lot of stuff on Facebook and Instagram that she posted and other people have posted. And it just is amazing what she's been able to accomplish, and kudos to her. That's fucking awesome. And
RPGs, although they're getting much better with diversity, truth is the fact that she's a female appearing individual, and has risen to this level. I mean, there are wonderful women. And trans women who in the field who don't really get the credit that they deserve for being foundational to role playing. So and Kelsey is moving on in that tradition. So yeah, absolutely kudos to her.
Yeah, fantastic, awesome. That's a great number one pick.
It's always time to go indie now.
Zero Means You're Dead.